Hello, this is Naren water level controller model WLC-25. This is an all new model that can be used for the sump to overhead tank version. So this is suitable for the rating up to 2 HP and can be used for monoblock pumps as well as open well submersible pumps. So for monoblock pumps, those are the pumps with direct plugging in to the socket, and the second type is the open well submersible pumps, for which you would get a starter similar to this. That will be coming along with the motor, and for both of these motors the same device works. And coming to the overview of the device, it's a metal body and there's a on off switch here. So once you power on the device, there are two displays which you can notice. So display 1, which is the overhead tank percentage display, and this is the display 2 or the sump display. So this will both of these displays basically demonstrate what is the water level in the sump and the overhead tank in terms of percentage. So the percentage will vary as 0, 25, 50, 75 and 100. Similar to the sump also, you have these 4 bifurcations. So basically you will be requiring 5 sensors for the sump and 5 sensors for the overhead tank, one sensor being common. Okay, and then the body will be a metal body, and then you have these separate indicators for power on, dry run, trip and the maximum run time. You also have the motor on indication and the motor running light. Then you have this need or reset button that can be used to semi-automatically, it's for semi-automatic operation. Pressing this will manually switch on the motor and automatically turn it off when the tank is full. So basically all the features that is required for a sump to tank motor are all there in this model. And the advantage of having this displays, the display is clearly visible even from a distance. So whereas in our earlier models you had those LEDs, from a distance you would be confused whether it is 2 LEDs blinking or the 3 LEDs. Whereas in this case the visibility is very clear and you can make out the water levels from a distance. And quickly moving ahead to the connections. So for you can just there's a cap which will be provided here, and once you remove that cap you will get to see all these connectors. From the left hand side it is the power connectors. So 1, 2 and 3, 4 basically are the power terminals. 1 and 2 will be the incoming supply, 220 volt supply to our water level controller. This will be directly from the grid. And then 3 and 4, if you are using a monoblock motor, will be directly going to your motor cables. Or if you have an open well submersible pump, the starter looks similar to this. In this case 3 and 4 from our water level controller should be given as the input to the starter. So 3 and 4 whatever we have taken is going as input to the starter terminals 1 and 2, and then motor cables again will be 3 in numbers RYB, which will be connected to the starter, and the MCB on the starter should always be in the on position. Okay. And again, if you want us to give it as a bundle, we can also give it as the whole starter setup also. And then these are about the power connectors. Then you have these 2 bypass terminals. So this is only in case you want to manually switch on the motor. So for that we have given this terminal as a provision. So here what you can do is you can take an MCB or a DP of this current carrying capacity, maybe a 16 amp DP would do, and input to the DP can be connected to one of this terminal and output to the other terminal. Basically it can be DP or an MCB. So these 2 terminals should be shorted via an MCB or DP, so that whenever these 2 terminals are interconnected, that is when the motor runs manually. So that is why these 2 provisions are given. And then the rest are all your sensor connections. So along with the package you will be receiving a sensor set or a sensor kit like this. So there will be 5 of the 5 bullet sensors for the sump, 5 bullet sensors for the tank and 1 dry run sensor. Altogether you will have 10 bullet sensors and 1 dry run sensor. Bullet sensor looks something similar to this. This is how it looks. There are different colors which are color coded. This is a bullet sensor, and the dry run sensor will look similar to this. This is the dry run sensor. Okay. So bullet sensor, as I show, will carry 1 wire coming out of it and the stainless steel tip which is at the bottom. So here coming to the connections, the first bullet sensor in the sump, which will sit in the bottommost point in the sump, should be given to the common terminal, and then you have the bullet sensor which sits just on top, which is slightly above the motor level in case of a submersible motor. So that will go to the sump low. So that is the second bullet sensor, which is situated right on top of the motor. So meaning whenever water level falls below this low level mark, that is when the motor is turned off. Then you have this sump 50% mark, which sits at let us say around 40% of the mark in the sump. Then you have the sump 75%, which sits at 60% or maybe 75% mark in the sump. And then you have sump 100%. Sump 100% is the topmost sensor in the sump. And make sure the sump 100% mark is way at the actual level of 80%. So basically there are 5 levels in the sump, the first one being common and the 4 percentage levels. Similar to that, you have 5 sensors to be placed in the overhead tank as well. So again, the bottommost sensor should be given to the common terminal itself. The common terminal will have 2 wires, one for the sump and one for the tank. Then based on the levels, again you have sump 25, sump 50, sump 75 and tank 25, tank 50, tank 75 and tank 100. So likewise you can just place these sensors accordingly on the tank overhead tank basically. So the 58% mark is when the motor starts. Whenever water falls below the 50% in the tank, that is when the motor starts, and whenever water touches the 100% mark in the tank, that is when the motor switches off. So you can make the placement of the sensors accordingly. And then the last sensor is the dry run sensor. The dry run sensor, let us assume this is the pipe which is feeding the water to the overhead tank. Dry run sensor sits exactly at the inlet. So whatever water that comes and falls inside the tank should fall on the dry run sensor and then enter the tank. So if you can notice, the dry run sensor will be having 2 screws like this. So so the dry run sensor sits on the tap. Let us say my finger is the tap. Dry run sensor sits somewhere like this. Whatever water is coming and falling will be falling on these the stainless steel tips, and the water should touch both the tips. So that is how the placement has to be done. Then you have these 2 wires which are coming out of the dry run sensor. These 2 wires, one of the wires should be connected to common and the second wire should be connected to the dry run terminal. Dry run is the very last terminal. So common basically has 3 wires, one for the sump, one for the overhead tank and one from the dry run sensor. So this is pretty much about the sensor connections. I hope the connections are clear. We will quickly move on to the operations. So quickly moving at the features. So you will have these percentage indication. The first thing being, whenever the water level in the overhead tank falls below 50%, the device checks for the availability of water in the sump. If the water is there in the sump, that is when the motor is turned on. When the overhead tank fills up, the motor is automatically turned off. This is case number 1. So next case is, while the motor is running, if the water in the sump gets empty, that is when the motor is turned off. So the device takes care of not allowing the motor to operate when the sump is out of water. Then you have a third case wherein you might be needing a manual trigger. Let us say your tank is 75% full and you would be requiring it to be full for some reason. In that case, you can always make use of this button. So pressing this button will manually switch on the motor, and when the tank is full, the motor is automatically turned off. This is case number 4. And then there is another important aspect here. Whenever there is a power cut and power resumption, the device has a power on delay feature. You can adjust that feature as well. So whenever there is a power cut and power resumption, the device waits for a particular amount of time, that is the settable parameter, after which it will resume the operations. So thereby you can allow the voltage to stabilize before resuming the operation. Then you also have this maximum run feature. Maximum run feature is, for example, if the tank takes around half an hour to fill up, you can set a time of around 35 or 40 minutes. So the device controller constantly checks for the time for which the motor is on, and if the time for which it is on crosses the time that you have set, so that is when the sensor automatically senses something is not right and it turns off the motor, and whenever it turns off due to that error, that is when this max run light glows. So you would be knowing that the motor is actually turning on for more duration than required. So you can just check the reason and fix it up. Then you have this dry run trip. So dry run trip is pretty simple. So let us say the sump had water and the motor had switched on, and for some reason the pipeline didn't deliver water. This can be some airlock condition or something like that. In that condition, there are chances of motor overrunning because the water is technically not falling inside the overhead tank. So the device constantly checks, and there is a dry run trip time that can be configured in the device, and if the motor is switched on and the water doesn't touch the dry run sensor, even after that time is elapsed, that is when the sensor detects that, the water level controller detects that and turns off the motor, and this dry run light shows up. Those are pretty much about all the features required by a domestic household, and we have covered most of it. We will quickly jump into the demonstration of the same. So, we will now lower the percentage in the overhead tank. Overhead tank is at 100% mark. So, now we have made it 75, and we will still reduce the water. So, now 50%, you can see the motor switching on, and you will see this motor on light, and the moment the water hits the dry run sensor, this is when you will see the flow lights coming in also. The motor is on, the tank is filling up now. Let us say the tank fills up. So, fills up to 75% mark, and it now fills up to 100% mark. So, since the tank is full, the motor will be turned off now. Okay. Yeah, the motor just turned off. So, this is the basic water level functionality. Now, we will generate a case wherein the tank gets empty. So, we will be lowering the water level in the tank. So, now the motor turned on, and parallelly we will be taking out the water in the sump. The sump in the water reduces now. So, let us say the motor is on, the water in the sump is dropping below the low level. So, you can see this condition. Whenever water in the sump drops below 25%, the motor is immediately shut off, because there is no water at the source to pump the water. So, this is case number 2, and whenever this case occurs, the controller constantly checks for the water to come to the sump. Whenever the sump gets water, that is when the motor automatically starts by itself, thereby filling up the overhead tank. So, the moment the tank fills up, the motor is automatically turned off. This is about the dry run condition also that we just saw. The motor will be switched off now. Yeah, the motor turned off. Now, we will quickly have a look at the need case also. So, now the tank is at 75% mark, let us say. Yep. So, now if you want to manually fill up the overhead tank, you can make use of this button, which is a semi-automatic button. So, pressing this will manually switch on the motor. So, whenever the tank fills up again, the motor is automatically turned off. So, the motor turned on. When the tank fills up at 100%, the motor is automatically turned off. So, this is like a semi-automatic operation now. Yep, the motor switched off. So, this is all the use cases that we would be seeing in the domestic household. Again, this water level controller is an improvised version of whatever we had earlier, and the range of operation, or the visibility range, is greatly improved in this. And this is suitable for up to 2 HP open well, submersible, or monoblock pumps. This model is available with us now, and you can give us a call on 99722 43774 to avail this product, and also you can shop for this product online on our website. And I hope the video was clear. Any doubts, you can always reach us out. Thank you so much for watching this video.